All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a minute. So this is a little different than our normal kind of formal council meeting, and the reason why the council wanted to move this into more of a workshop event is so that, it can be an easy two-way discussion, unlike public comment at council that's very formal and you have a time limit. There's no time limit tonight. This is going to be recorded. So, and it'll be available on the city website. So if you have friends or others that you think would benefit from watching this, please invite them. You can forward them the link. As far as, wanting to again, have a two-way conversation, Christina's got some speakers cards out front, just so that we can stay somewhat coordinated. Go ahead and just fill out a speaker card. If during the event there's something you want to talk about and you haven't filled out a speaker's card yet, just raise your hand and we'll probably the easiest way to manage it. So let me quickly do some introductions. So I don't know if everybody knows who's up here, but there's several volunteers that are here. So I have the chair of two of our committees here in the city. So Ray Fernandez is the chair of our planning committee. Quan Lee is the chair of our emergency preparedness committee. Again, two voluntary positions that we have here in the city that look after the various aspects of, our codes and ensuring that we are as prepared as we can be for any event that happens. To my left, I'll let the gentlemen over here introduce themselves and their roles, but Chiefs, if you guys want to start, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So my name is Edward Martin. I'm the La Habra Heights Deputy Chief.
Hi, my name is Ryan Jorgensen. I am the Battalion Chief of Fire Prevention and EMS. I'm your Fire Marshal.
Hello, my name is Dante Cornejo. I'm with My Safe LA. I'm our Wildfire Operations Supervisor Captain.
So we reached out to Fire Safe and Dante for a couple of reasons. Number one, like to understand what's going on across LA County and the region when it comes to how are other cities getting prepared and what changes are they making to things like codes, both from a code enforcement perspective, but also from a building code perspective and a planning perspective, so that we can understand what's happening across the county, across the region in this space, understand some of the best practices that are going on, and be asking the Planning Commission and our Preparedness Committee to start looking at how we begin to adopt some of these practices that we see. Because I've heard from several of you that are here tonight that have done some recent home remodeling and other work that maybe we weren't as progressive as we thought with our fire codes and some of the building codes as we should be. So Dante's going to help us understand what's going on across the region in that aspect. Our fire chiefs will help us understand what the fire department is doing in this area. Specifically, I'm looking for our fire marshal this year to be, and I'll use a term here, and please don't take it the wrong way, but given what has happened, I'll say it this way, incredibly aggressive with how we manage the vegetation and brush this season. I think everyone knows we haven't got a lot of rain this year. There was a lot of growth last year, and we've had just enough rain this year to drive significant growth again this year. So looking to have a conversation about that. And then I'm looking to Quan to kind of start pulling a lot of this together from an emergency preparedness perspective, especially beginning, and I know there's a gentleman, John Dominguez, is here too, that's been working on evacuation planning. One of the things that I think a lot of us saw horrifically on January 7th was bulldozers pushing cars out of the way in the Palisades because people couldn't evacuate. We can't have that happen here. So again, focused on what do we do to make sure we have safe and effective evacuation planning and evacuation routes. The EPC over the last couple of years has been working on that. I know we did a lot of tree removal along Hacienda and some of the other roads to make sure that we began to get rid of some of the more dangerous trees in the city. And then, Ray, from a planning perspective, we obviously have some code enhancements that we're going to need to get pretty aggressive with moving forward. So that's kind of it's going to be pretty free-flowing. We're going to start with my Safe LA and a presentation. I've got two speakers cards. Steve and Glenn, do you guys want to speak now, or do you want to speak during the event? Steve wants to speak now, okay.
Thank you. Stephen Blagden, Citron Road, speaking on my own behalf. Has a home ever been lost in La Habra Heights to a brush fire? Even the 1955 fire memorialized out front had no loss of homes. This could be good to know for getting house insurance. Clearing dried and dead brush is good. We've seen that certain flammable trees are far worse, spreading sparks, flames, and embers. The city weed abatement brochure could encourage removal of eucalyptus, fan palms, and Italian cypress trees with pictures of them. We've also seen, and articles have been written about the protective nature of other trees and vegetation. In Altadena, people reported seeing flying, burning embers landing in deodar cedar trees and being extinguished. Coast live oaks also were reported to block flying embers. There are so many pictures of homes incinerated to ash, yet surrounding trees and bushes are green. I have seen this in pictures of many fires for many years. After a fire up north, a fire official attributed avocado groves as saving the city of Goleta from burning down. In Irvine, avocado groves were incorporated into a fire protection plan for a housing tract. It is easy to say remove all or most vegetation from around houses. There will be nothing or little to burn. However, healthy trees and bushes not only make the city more scenic and provide privacy, they also can be protective against fire. I have 4 to 5 foot high jade plants adjacent to parts of my house. They are standing water. I am more defended with them than I would be if they weren't there. More focus should be placed on home hardening, maybe alternate years with focus on weed abatement 1 year and home hardening the next. Just as, if not more important than fuel modification, home hardening is ignition prevention. While we have seen damaging recent fires, there were millions of other just as flammable acres that did not burn. Why? No ignition. Nothing started a fire. It is somewhat a misnomer to call these wildfires, and they are man-made and most entirely preventable. Whether started by homeless parties, vehicles, arson, or power lines, they're all man-made. I heard 2 recent fires may have been started by someone firing a flare gun into a canyon. Pretty sad. There were regular fires in the hills above my house, the skyline ridgeline. Most were people lighting fires after accessing the hills through the Punta del Este gate. Since that has been closed, the fires are few. A lot is said about the threat of Powder Canyon. There are no coyotes or squirrels dropping lit cigarettes. The real problem is protecting Powder Canyon from people. It could be prudent to close Fullerton Road and Skyline Drive along Powder Canyon to non-resident traffic on red flag days. There have been fires along Hacienda. It would similarly be prudent to close Hacienda through traffic on red flag days. The power lines along the northern city border are a risk. I heard that one of the line sets is not used, but don't know for sure. Would that be good to find out? While the tallest towers were proposed, the city could have joined Chino Hills to get them placed underground. Council members Bergman and Carroll spoke before the Public Utilities Commission at the time, but the rest of the council opposed requiring Edison to put them underground. In summary, encourage removal of flammable trees, allow healthy trees and bushes to remain and be placed around new construction, encourage home hardening, close roads to non-residents, and take measures to protect the city on red flag days. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Glenn, did you want to?
Hello, Glenn Peterson, 441 West Skyline Drive. I'm actually going to dive into a fairly specific item that John asked me to come up and talk about, and that is a recent roof installation project that I've completed. Now, what preceded this was my insurance being canceled and a 30-item list of fix-its. One of the items was roof. My roof didn't need fixing. It was asbestos shingle and it was asphalt shingle. But, you know, you just can't, there's no way to talk to the insurance underwriter, and their agents are kind of powerless when it comes to when they want to cancel you. So anyway, to the roof, one of the things they asked for, I guess it was not the roof, but associated with the roof, is 16th-inch mesh screening on all my vents to prevent embers from entering the attic. And so I did this, but it wasn't easy. My contractor didn't know what to do about it. They just are familiar with their, with their lineup of products that they offer, and I checked all their products out. The roof vents were all 1/8 of an inch. The ridge vent was even worse. It was 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch, and it was slots. So I found that kind of interesting, that they could go pull a permit using those products. And I'm pretty sure they could with the city, but I didn't go that route. I knew enough to require them to go 1/16 of an inch, which became a big go-around with them, because they didn't really know how to accomplish that. I mean, I eventually bought a roll of 16th-inch mesh from Home Depot, and every opening in my roof got 16-inch mesh laid down over it, and then whatever they wanted to provide, they provided on top. I still had 2 vents put in where the roofers are so unfamiliar with doing this that they just forgot. And they put it in, and I'm with my flashlight peeking in there, and I realized they had 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch, I'm not quite sure which. And so they had to come back and redo those. When I spoke to the inspector, when they came out, I mentioned this to the inspector, and the inspector told me that the city doesn't have a 16th inch requirement, that 1/8 of an inch is all that's needed. Found that odd, and I would like to see, I hope we change that. And that's about it with that experience. I did want to echo what Stephen said about the plants, and particularly in the 5-foot clear zone and even around the house. The type of plant makes a difference. Let's get rid of let's work on the flammable ones, but keep the ones that are known to be fire resistant. Back to my insurance experience, I have jade plant too, and the only person I could really get any info out of was the inspector that they sent. The inspector just says, I take photographs and write up a checklist. I asked him about the jade plant, or what is a flammable shrub, or what's a shrub in my clear zone? He pointed to my jade plant and says that one qualifies, it would need to go. I'll leave it with that. Obviously, that plant did not need to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. All right, we'll move to our fire safety member. I think you have a presentation.
That is correct. I do have a presentation. It'll be pulling up on screen, and then I'll have my laptop just so I can kind of follow along as we present. If you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'm used to standing up while doing this, so forgive me as I kind of want to get a little jumpy and stand up. But if you have any questions, feel free to raise my hand. If I don't know the answer to your questions, I'll write them down, and I'll try and get back to you and try and research that as much as I can. A little bit about my background. I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Dante Cornejo. I'm a former wildland firefighter with the U.S. Forest Service. I was with the Palomar Hotshots for several seasons and been an EMT for the past 6 years. Just graduated with my bachelor's degree in fire administration, and I've been with My Safe LA for just over a year now. But I oversee all of our wildfire resilience operations within LA County and Riverside County. I try and keep myself as educated as I can when it comes to what the current standards are and what insurers are offering in terms of requirements. There's been a lot of changes. Like I said, if I don't know the answer, I'll try and research and get back to you, but this is the presentation I have for you guys tonight. So first off, welcome. This is our wildfire preparedness presentation. We can go ahead and go to our next slide. So I have it designated into several different parts, just to kind of make it a little bit easier to follow along. This first part is just kind of going to be a quick overview. So these are the current threats in terms of what is currently going on within the county of LA. Our next slide, please. So LA County, as we know, is pretty much surrounded. LA County is currently at the highest risk according to FEMA. As we know, a lot of our canyons are filled with excessive vegetation due in part to the strong winter rains these past couple years. All of the pictures in our presentation have been taken in-house from our photographers. But as we know, there was several different brush fires within the summer of 2023, and we had many different brush fires to start off this new year of 2025. Thank you. So current numbers on wildfire, this is currently out of date, but from FEMA. So the LA County is ranked at the top 100% in the US at risk for wildfire. Approximately 500,000 of its homes or properties within LA County are at risk, which is about a quarter of the homes within LA County. So there's a significant risk, which I'm sure, as you guys know, which we just experienced at the start of this year. 2021 study supported by NOAA, which is the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, concluded that climate change has been the main driver with the increase of wildfire. So as we know, things have been kind of going on. We've been having wetter winters, hotter summers, and we're starting to transition from La Nina to El Nino, so from a lot of rain to to a more drier climate. So these are pictures that I'm sure you guys are kind of familiar with in terms of your area of what some areas might look like. So this is what one area might look like today, and this is what it could possibly look like tomorrow. So when it comes to preparing, it's best to start in terms of preparing for wildfire, starting today or as soon as you can, because as we know, we don't know when the next wildfire will happen, but what we do have control over is when we start to prepare for it. So as wildfires become more dangerous, the best resistance is to limit the ignitability of your home and property. So when we talk about that, it'll be kind of going into our next section of both home hardening and defensible space efforts in terms of kind of what to focus on. And there's two kind of different things that when it comes to wildfires and defending your home and properties, I kind of break it up into risks and hazards. Risks is something that you have control over. You can lower your risk of something affecting you, but when it comes to hazards, you can only identify them and just know how to act. So a hazard would be a wildfire. A risk is going to be the vegetation around your home or your current status in terms of home hardening. You can better prepare your home You can only just prepare in terms of a wildfire and what actions you'll take when that happens. So this is going to be our next part in terms of home hardening. So this is how kind of My Safe LA helps out. So we are the Regional Fire Safe Council for LA County. If there's, I'll dive into that a little bit later, but there's two different programs that are free. One is called the California Fire Safe Council, and the other one is going to be the NFPA Firewise Community, which I'll dive into about that a little bit later. So when we kind of discuss preparing, it all starts with a plan. So you want to make a wildfire plan, you want to plan to prepare, you want to make a preparedness plan, and ultimately plan to survive and what's going to come after, how to recover. When we talk about making sure that we're notified, there's multiple ways of getting notification systems. One of them is going to be Notify LA. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Watch Duty, and I'm sure people have nightmares with that notification system of that ringing going off, but there's multiple different avenues of getting yourself notified of when a wildfire would be potentially approaching. Another one would be getting yourself a NOAA radio. These radios work by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association will notify you if there is a natural disaster in the area, whether it's tornado, earthquake, wildfire, and they naturally trigger themselves. How they work is it plugs into the wall, you kind of set it and kind of forget it in the sense of you plug it in, it has a battery backup. If the power were to go out, that battery backup would take over, so you would still get notified as well. We'd also recommend that you build a wildfire go kit in the sense of if a wildfire happens in the middle of the night, you at least have some materials in terms of important documents, extra clothing, etc., ready to go in case that happens and you're caught off guard with that. Also creating a family communications plan, identifying if someone's at home, kind of what steps are you going to take in terms of if someone's at home and someone's at work, how are you going to notify each other, where are you going to meet potentially. Also having an area outside of the city or county if you have to evacuate, having a potential person as a place to go or a person to call as things kind of get inundated with evacuation centers and hotels, if that's possible. And then ultimately, it comes with creating defensible space around your home and home hardening. And when we talk about kind of developing a plan, you want to practice it as much as you can. If that's creating a contact list and putting it onto your refrigerator, just in case technology goes out, you at least have that in case your phone dies and you don't have any of your emergency contacts numbers saved. So just kind of doing that. And then joining a group of other homeowners to share wildfire preparedness information. It's a community effort. It's not a solo endeavor. So working together, there's plenty of us in this room right now. If we all go out and find one thing about wildfire, that's a wealth of knowledge that we can all share with each other. And then ultimately ensuring your home and property if possible. And we'll kind of talk about that in terms of what's going on with the insurance and then how to ultimately better prepare yourselves to be as insurable as possible. So a good point was brought up twice earlier when it comes to home hardening. Home hardening is going to be one of the two key things that you can do in terms of reducing the chance of your home being destroyed by a fire. So when we talk about home hardening, there's several different things to focus on. One major component is going to be vents, and the current recommendation is a 1/8 inch mesh screen on your vents. However, some insurers are requiring a more stringent, and that would be a 1/16 inch. I would recommend with the 1/16 as well, just for the reasoning being, the reason why vents are screened is in a wind-driven fire, embers are going to be flying through the air. Embers can spot up to a mile ahead if the winds are strong enough. So when your vents are appropriately screened with a finer mesh, the size of the ember that will get through is going to be a lot smaller, and if it does land, there's a less of a chance of it possibly igniting. If you have a 1/4 inch screen, the embers that can get through are a lot bigger and they can start to accumulate, which can, how a lot of houses catch on fire is going to be from the attic with that screening. So if you go with a finer mesh, the size will be a lot smaller and potential to cause less damage. And I always say potential because it's never 100%. You can take all the steps, but ultimately it's never going to be 100%, just to be fully transparent with everyone, but you can lower your risk as much as you can. When it was also brought up about roofing. So there's different classifications of roofing. There's Class A roof, which is going to be the most accessible roof. And when we talk about Class A roofs, they're going to be kind of the ones that are going to be metal or Spanish tile or clay. When we come, asphalt roofs are going to be classified as a Class C, so that's probably why your insurer requested you to upgrade it. Although it can be pretty expensive, that's going to be something that kind of ties into home hardening. And when we talk about home hardening, it's all about kind of taking it in pieces. Especially, it can be very expensive if you try to do it all at once. So identifying one thing to kind of focus on, that would lower your risk a lot more if you left it than as is. So if you focus on your vents, work on your vents. As soon as that's done, identifying what the next part is, whether that's boxing in your eaves, as you can see in the second row of pictures. That middle picture there, if you can see it, that's what open eaves looks like. And that picture to the right of it is going to be boxing those in. So, and the point of boxing in your eaves with a wind-driven fire, when the wind is coming in, it'll hit your house or just any wall, and it'll kind of eddy up into a current effect, up into your roof or into where those eaves are, and it'll kind of start to throw embers up into those eaves if they're not maintained. So boxing that in just helps lower that risk overall. So the next slide is going to be about vents, and I've kind of touched on that, but so these are some different examples of vents. The bottom picture is going to be foundational vents, but ultimately the overall goal is to screen in all the vents you have, whether it's your attic vent, foundational vent, and then one of those pictures there is going to be a spark arrestor over a chimney. Spark arrestors are important in terms of if you use a fireplace or not, but it's good for keeping the embers from your fireplace out, from getting out and starting a wildfire that way. But ultimately, if embers do get into your fireplace, they're not really going to go anywhere. But using home hardening and screening all your vents is going to be super important. The next slide is going to be talking about windows and shutters. Swapping your windows from a single pane to a dual pane tempered glass is going to be very important. Although this can be, like I've said, expensive, focusing on one thing at a time is going to be the easiest way to tackle all of this stuff. But when it comes to swapping your windows, the reason why we recommend dual pane is because they are more heat resistant, and if one does break, there you have a secondary backup layer as well. Tempered glass also does break into smaller pieces versus your single pane are going to break into larger pieces and going to be a lot sharper. And why we recommend shutters over windows is, shutters over curtains. Curtains can be flammable. So if your window does break, the embers can hit your curtains and then potentially ignite your curtains and then the rest of your house from there. Whereas shutters, it could be a lot more resistant. And the next slide is going to be talking about roofs, which I've touched on. And then our next slide is kind of what to do if all this is kind of too expensive. So there's things that you can do, that all it takes is just your time and energy. So when it comes to taking steps to decrease the ignitability of your home, a lot of this stuff can kind of seem like common sense, but it might not feel like that because there's a lot of unknowns. So focusing on different things is going to be super important when we talk about fire prevention actions. So if you have stacks of wood that are right next to your house, grabbing that and moving them at least 12 feet away from your house is going to be better than keeping it right there. Or moving it to the edge of the property line. So that's something that all it takes is your time and energy to just pick it up and move it over there. Any overhanging branches that might touch your roof or decking, removing those limbs from touching your roof and decks for two reasons. If there is a canopy fire, if that tree does ignite, that's a potential pathway to having your house ignite, or from the leaf litter or droppings from that fire can accumulate onto your roof and potentially start a fire that way. Cleaning out under any decks and pool areas, You'd be surprised how much dead vegetation can accumulate under deckings and pools. So if you have access to getting under that area, cleaning it up as much as you can is going to help reduce that risk as well. Keeping your gutters clean and considering covering them with protective shields. What we mean by that is if you have open exposed gutters, going in and making sure that there's not a lot of dead vegetation that is just kind of staying stagnant in those gutters. And then you can screen them with a gutter guard that is metal. And what that does is if you do have a tree that throws a lot of dead leaves onto your roofs or gutters, it stays on top and it makes it easier for you just to kind of take a leaf blower if you have access to it, or just go up on a ladder, or if you have a person that cleans it, just wipe it off that way and clean it off, just so that vegetation does not accumulate inside of the gutters. Installing shutters on windows, if you can't afford dual pane replacements. So shutters is going to be a lot more safer than curtains if you can't afford dual pane, but ultimately dual pane is going to be the safest way to go. But these is just kind of some low cost options while you focus on other things. Moving patio furniture at least 8 feet away from your home. A lot of people, we have patio furniture, especially wooden patio furniture, that is right next to our doors and stuff. Moving that as far away as possible, at least 8 feet out of that 5-foot zone, or I'll kind of discuss that momentarily, is going to be a lot safer. Also, if you have cushions on your patio furniture, I always recommend kind of starting to develop I guess, when it rains, we know to grab a raincoat and an umbrella, but when it's fire season, we don't know what to do, in the sense of we have to start adapting. So when that humidity drops and that heat goes up, starting to do a few things. So if you have cushions on your patio furniture, going out and removing those cushions, because there could be potential for a wildfire event. So cushions can be pretty flammable. They're going to be a lot more flammable than your current patio furniture. So if you have removable cushions or covers, taking those off and bringing those inside so that they're protected, so those are not igniting. Not letting any toys stack up against your structure. So kids' toys, plastics, those are a lot pretty flammable in the sense of plastics or oil-based. So if there's a good radiant heat, that will start heating that up and potentially melting down all that plastic material, which can then ignite your house as well. So either keeping those inside or putting those away as far as you can. And then ensuring that your garage door closes and seals completely. There's many times where I've gone out and I've done a wildfire home assessment on someone's property, and the seal on their garage door, there's very big gaps, and their garage door doesn't seal all the way. And especially from this past fire, a lot of homeowners were telling me that they had a lot of ash in their garage and they couldn't figure out why. And then I took a look and I was like, you have a gap like this big in the corner. So just, you guys know your homes and you guys might not see these things, but trying to take a deeper look with a finer microscope and just identifying possible pathways into your home is going to be a lot safer. So our next part, we're going to be discussing, sorry, I'm having a stutter, I apologize. We're going to be discussing defensible space. So 13 of the most destructive fires have happened since 2017. This is also out of date. I forgot to accumulate from these past two. But 20 of the most destructive fires have happened in the past 8 years. Combined with these fires combined, they've nearly destroyed about 40,000 structures and killed about 150 people. So creating defensible space is going to be super important, especially by establishing a buffer zone. So the reason why we discuss defensible space is to reduce ignition points around your property, and in terms of if a fire is coming, there's going to be less and less fuel as it approaches your property. And by taking defensible space actions, you can reduce the chance of ignition by up to from 25 to 75%. And like I've said earlier, it's never going to be 100% because there's going to be a lot of variables that can play into how a structure burns or whatnot, but you do lower your risk overall by taking these steps. So our first thing is going to be talking about Zone 0. Has anyone heard of Zone 0 at all? Raise a hand. Who's not familiar with Zone 0? Okay. So I'll discuss zone 0. So if you guys can kind of see that. So what zone 0 is, we are talking about the 0 to 5 foot zone from your structure. So from any wall out 5 feet, that is going to be referred as zone 0. So zone 0 is actually a law that was passed in 2021, but it's not currently enforced. However, insurance companies, many of them have zone 0 requirements. So what zone 0 means is no flammable material within that 0 to 5 foot zone. So no vegetation that could be potentially flammable, and some insurers actually state no vegetation at all. So just having a non-combustible area within that 0 to 5 foot zone, such as river rock, pea stone. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of studies are showing that in a wind-driven fire, when those embers do hit your house and they bounce off, they land within that 0 to 5 foot zone. And that's a major factor in terms of igniting a lot of the structures in wildfires. Our next zone is going to be zone 1. And so when we talk about zone 1, this is going to be that zone a little bit further out, 5 to 30 feet out. And what to focus on in this first zone is going to be removing any dead plants, grasses, weeds, trying to think lean and green. So trying to thin out as much vegetation as you can. Removing dead or dry leaves or pine needles in that area. Trimming trees regularly and keeping a minimum of 10 feet from other trees if possible. But ultimately, we want to try and create as much separation as you can, but in some places that's not fully realistic. So just trying to do it as best you can. And also, when we talk about trimming trees, we want to trim it the overall size, but we also want to limb them up. So from 0 to 6 feet, we don't want any limbs hanging below that. So we want to trim trees at least 6 feet up from the ground as well. And then we talked about creating separation between the trees, also shrubs and other items that could potentially catch on fire, such as patio furniture, wood piles, swing sets, etc. And when we discuss these two zones, we are also kind of looking at other ignition points as well. So when we discuss that 0 to 5 foot zone, if you have a wood decking, replacing potential panels within that first 0 to 5 foot zone to a metal material, or if you have a wood fence, swapping that out to a non-combustible material as well is something that we're looking at as well when we talk about home hardening and defensible space within that 0 to 5 foot zone. And then zone 2 is going to be 30 to 100 feet out. And kind of what we're looking about that is you can have some vegetation, but we're just maintaining it all throughout. So making sure that we're cutting or mowing our grasses to a maximum of 4 inches. This is what CAL FIRE states. We don't want to let it grow out of control. You don't need to take a ruler to make sure it's 4 inches, but making sure that we're keeping it down to a minimum. And ultimately, creating more horizontal space between trees, creating vertical space between grasses and shrubs. So, there's a diagram that'll kind of illustrate this a little bit better as well. And then keeping on with what we've learned from zone 1s and 0 of cleaning up any dead vegetation and making sure that we have a lean and green environment and creating that space. And then if you have any propane tanks, making sure, or any outbuildings, making sure that around any propane tanks that if possible, there is at least a 10-foot barrier around of non-combustible material. So if you have to designate an area for propane tanks, please do so, but we want to make sure that there's no flammable material around them if possible. So when we talk about vertical spacing, this is kind of what we're trying to illustrate in terms of horizontal spacing and then in vertical spacing. So horizontal spacing is going to be the different spacing. So if we look, and it's all depending on slopes, but overall in that top row, as you can kind of see that there's some plants on fire. That's what we refer to as ladder fuel. So in terms of climbing a ladder, you climb rung by rung. But when it comes to wildfire, removing some of that vegetation and breaking or removing parts of that rung of the ladder, it'll be harder for vegetation to climb up into those trees. So if you're trying to climb a ladder and there's three rungs missing, you can only go so far up that ladder. So it's kind of that same mentality when we discuss creating vertical spacing. So we don't want any shrubs or vegetation under the canopies of trees, just to eliminate those possible ladders. And then also tree to tree ignition or vegetation to or shrub to shrub ignition. So in terms of, use these as an example, if these water bottles are butted up against each other, and we're not going to call them water bottles, we'll call them trees, but if these were next to each other, if this one were to catch on fire, do you think it would catch this one on fire? Yes, right? But if we create a little bit more spacing, it would be a lot harder for that to ignite. Same thing if it's like this, all right? If this is a vegetation here or a shrub under a tree, if they're butted up against each other, it's a lot easier for this tree to catch on fire versus if we kind of space it out a little bit, we create that space, we're breaking it up a little bit. And then when we talk about if your house is on a slope, we want to increase that space on the steeper the slope is. So I know I've kind of given a lot of bad news, but so there is some good news. So when we talk about potential discounts and making your shelf more insurable, by doing these things, this is with the California Fair Plan, if you guys have heard of it. If you've hardened your home and defended your property, many insurers, including the California Fair Plan, offer sliding discounts determining based off the steps you've taken in terms of home hardening and defensible space. However, just as a resident he was inspected by the insurer, so you'll take all the steps in terms of defending your home and making your home as safe as possible in terms of home hardening and defensible space, but the insurer will send an inspector out on their behalf to come out and look and kind of assess. So some of the discount requirements is going to be just kind of a lot of what I talked about, but clearing vegetation debris from under decks, removing combustible sheds and other buildings from the immediate surroundings to the home to at least of 30 feet. Defensible space compliance from that zone 0, 1, 2, and 3. So trimming of trees, brush removal, debris from yard, and then that's in compliance with the state law and local ordinances within of where you reside. And then also structure protection. So making sure you have a Class A roof, making sure you maintain that 5-foot ember-resistant zone, which is referred to as zone 0. Non-combustible materials 6 inches at the bottom of exterior walls. So if you have wood siding walls, the last 6 inches should be retrofitted to be a non-combustible material. Whether that's stuccoed or if you swap to metal or cement or something that's non-combustible, that you would also have to comply with that too. Having ember or fire-resistant vents, upgrading your windows, and also enclosing your eaves. Next slide, please. So do you think this home would qualify? No, right? So just kind of identifying different risks and ultimately trying to push forward. So this home would most likely burn in a wildfire, but in order to potentially get these discounts, you have to put in the work. Part 4 is going to be, we're just kind of discussing evacuations in terms of what happens, how evacuations work, and just the overall process of it. So there's an acronym here, PACE. Has anyone heard of this before? One person? So PACE stands for Primary, Alternate, Contingent, and Emergency. So when I say PACE, it's identifying your primary evacuation route, an alternate evacuation route, a contingency if that primary and alternate don't work, and ultimately your emergency route. I get a lot of questions in terms of what route will I take when there's a wildfire, and I tell them I don't know. In the sense of we don't know what the wind conditions will be that day, we don't know where the fire is going to be burning or what direction it's going to be going in. But I do tell them to identify all the possible routes, because if you start to lock in on one route and that route is potentially closed or it's used for emergency apparatus to enter into that area, you might start to be like a hamster, just kind of spinning in a circle on that wheel. So identifying all the possible routes will make you that much more safer when it comes to evacuating. In terms of evacuating, what do most people do wrong in relative to wildfire evacuations? Exactly. Most people leave too late. So when we discussed evacuations in terms of at the start of this presentation of preparing, you should kind of start to take steps to prepare for an evacuation if needed, and leave while there's a voluntary evacuation so you're not getting stuck or leaving too late. This next picture is from the campfire in Paradise. These were vehicles that burned. These were not people that burned, but these were vehicles that were left behind. But ultimately, we don't want to leave too late. Luckily, they got out on foot, but these are pictures from that. So how do evacuations work? So there's a lot of kind of unknowns in terms of how evacuations work or who orders them. So fire officials will map out likely where the fire is burning and heading. So they kind of map out where the fire is currently going and potentially where it's heading. And then the fire officials at the incident command post will then issue a call for an evacuation. Local law enforcement are typically responsible for enforcing the evacuation orders. And then one thing to know, a lot of people think that if I live near a fire road, I'm going to use that as my evacuation route. Fire roads are for emergency responders and not for residents unless authorized by fire or law officials. So that's why leaving early is going to be your safest bet when it comes to wildfires. To learn more about us and our organization, I have a slide it's just our website. It's wildfirela.org and mysafela.org. That'll be the next slide, sir. Thank you. There's more stuff on that. And then ultimately, I do have some brochures and stuff to hand out. I'm more than happy to take some questions if you guys have any. But if not, thank you guys for your time. And then there are a few websites I can kind of go over as well. But I do see a hand raised in the back.
Yeah, I'll ask here so everyone can hear me. Many of the streets here are one way in, one way out. How do you handle that?
So in terms of identifying one way in and one way out, I'm not very familiar in terms of the full layout of La Habra Heights, to be fully honest with you. But when it comes to getting an evacuation order from law enforcement, most likely they'll transition some roads. Even if it's a one-way out or whatever, they'll make them two ways. Or if it's one way in, one way out, they'll make them two ways just to help the flow of traffic. But ultimately, it's depending on what the current conditions are. That's why when I discuss, I apologize if this doesn't fully answer your question, sir, but discussing pace and identifying what the possible routes are is going to be your safest bet when it comes to that, especially if roads are one way in and one way out, and knowing what the traffic is like on the day. I mean, if it's going to be in the afternoon, people are going to be returning from work and stuff. Yes, sir. Yes, Chief.
So we're in the present position of doing that. We're organizing streets and identifying the roads that you would take to leave. And I'm wondering who's up for having a drill once a year or something, so that we can identify the problem areas ahead of time. Everybody should want to do a drill. That's what I'm working on. So what happens with evacuation is you're going to be notified well ahead of time. I'm not ever going to put you in a position where we're going to wait. It's an hour out. It's 2 hours out. If there's any threat to us, we're going to go now. And the point is to get you out as quickly and as safely as possible. Identifying the routes to do that is the problem that we're having right now, because you already know, living up here, our roads are very narrow. And so John's working on a plan. We're trying to make one or two roads one way only, so that as you're leaving, no other cars will be coming up in the opposite direction. So to do that, we have to plan ahead, and we have to go out and look, and then we have to drive them. So if I get your cooperation and we get a little drill going, we'll be able to say, well, can we come down in Canada? Can we come down? Hacienda is going to be a nightmare, because we will have to order the police department to stop traffic coming way over on Colima. And then we'll have to have them on Whittier Boulevard too. So it takes a while to get that in place, but we'll do that. And we'll, like I said, yes, ma'am, go ahead. Sure.
So
We're
let me just
working-
repeat the question for the folks that are, because I know there are some folks listening at home. So that the statement, I think, was that we need to have a large animal evacuation day, and we should also include large animals in our drill.
Right. At some of the other discussions, we've had that issue and that question come up before. And there was a party that identified herself saying that she would be more than willing to put her trailers up to help get the horses out. So we have to identify all those problems and work in it way in advance, not wait till the problem comes. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, come on up to the microphone, because we do, A, we're recording this, and B, there are people watching at home.
I know it's a relatively new concept, but is there any information on, possibly retrofitting our homes with sprinklers to utilize the pool, the water that we have in our pools?
Sure, that's at your own discretion. I have gone out to several homes and identified a lot of the homes that I've looked at and told the residents that would be an option for them, because a lot of your homes are wood-sided. And you can treat it with all the chemicals you want, but those chemicals will eventually be washed away by the rain. So if you have wood-sided or wood panelized construction, it doesn't matter what your defensible space is. If you're 0 to 1,000 yards away, if you get an ember cast onto your property, you're going to have problems. Yes, ma'am. Okay. What's the paint made out of? Right, but you're talking about complete fire retardant paint. Does not exist. Yeah, so, and then it's costly. We entertained a long time ago when I was with LA City, we used Barricade. Barricade is a product that was put on homes when we were going into structured defense. And it's a product that's actually made from the stuff that they put in the gel that they put in the baby diapers. The only problem with that is you can treat your home with it, but in the end, it's very costly to get it all off of your home after you've treated it. And you have to have the right machine to spray it on. And how many residents do we have? How many homes do we have? How much Barricade can we put on there? Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Chief. You used a word that maybe not everybody understands. I know I didn't until recently, speaking with some of your people. What exactly is an ember cast?
An amber cast. So just to give you an idea, so we're talking about putting mesh on your vents. Does anybody not know what we're talking about as far as 1/16 and 1/8 and all that? Numbers don't mean anything to me. I want you to be well informed and know what it is that you need to put on your vents to protect your property. For me, I would completely close off the vent. I wouldn't even give it a chance with a quarter or a 1/16 of an inch of a spark trying to get in there. So it's basically a spark arrestor, similar to what you put on your chimney. So the amber cast is the product that comes off a fire that's burning. I'm sure you've seen your fireplace and you see those little whiffs of little fire that come out of the wood. That's an ember. So as it's going up into the atmosphere and the wind gets a hold of it, that's an ember cast. So it goes up in the air, and then the wind catches it, and it casts it onto your property. And that's where the problem comes, because it could be as far away as 3 miles. Yes, ma'am.
So the question for those at home is, do we have a procedure in place to have, well, I'll call non-essential large vehicles not enter the city in the event of a evacuation?
Right, there would be a problem. So we'd have to organize with them also and let them know, make notification that to prevent any large truck. You see all the trucks, and the sheriff's department's working diligently every day to keep all those huge trucks that come up Hacienda. They still come up there, and they go down some of the roads, and they'll get stuck on Encanada, and they'll be. You folks know that.
Yeah, John, let's take a note of that for our evacuation planning. All right.
Yeah, John, work on the big trucks.
So, any other questions for our fire?
Why don't we have John speak upon Genesee, which is an evacuation notification?
Yep.
That's currently in place.
Yeah, we're
trying to
yeah.
get residents to download onto your app. It'll kind of map out our 5 zones that the city is divided in. If John could speak on that. And you folks, if you brought your cell phone, open up your app and download it now. I mean, it's the beginning. It's called Genesee, GENASYS. And it notifies all the fire areas and what's activity that's happening all across Southern California, i.e. it talks about the land movement, in Rolling Hills area right now that's going on. We saw it with the fires that happened. So John's been working on trying to map out our evacuation routes with our 5 zones and identify what zone you live in, because that's going to be the key. Okay, so I'm going to have John speak on that.
Yeah, thank you. Genesis, yes, that's the name of the app. If everyone can download that app, that's going to be a help, so you can identify for yourself what zone you're in. We've got 5 zones. 771 through 775 are the La Habra Heights zones. And to give you an idea how important it is and useful it is, before the Altadena and the Palisades fires, we had our zone already mapped out, and it's publicly available on the public website for everybody to see. But at that time, before the fires, we were like an island. We were the only ones that were mapped out. Other than West Covina had some zones mapped out. Palisades had some zones mapped out, I believe. And some northern towns of northern LA area. After the fires, half of LA has gone on to Genesis. So they all are, half of the city at least, half of the cities within LA County now have the Genesis map online, publicly visible for all those residents who live in that area to be aware what the zones are in case they need to evacuate. So in our case, I believe it's zone 775. I may be wrong. That is the Powder Canyon. So that's the starting point that needs to be evacuated. You'll see that on the map turning red. That means it needs to be you need to evacuate. Genesis also, the information that's available on Genesis is also forwarded to other apps, such as Watch Duty app. And Watch Duty has a lot of information to begin with. If you download Watch Duty app, it would actually beep at you when there's a fire. Every time there's a fire within the LA County area, it's going to beep at you, letting you know where the fire is at. So that would be a good starting point for you to be aware there's a fire somewhere. Find out where it's at, so at least you know whereabouts within the LA County is at. And so they tie in together. There's different information available on one app or the other, but Genesis is the bottom base level of information. Genesis creates the zones. They are contracted by the Office of Emergency Management, I believe, or something of the sort. I'm not quite sure. And so technically, I would estimate about half of, as of now, cities in California have that app. I have the zones mapped out for their city, and others are coming along. And it's not just California. There's a lot of cities, a lot of other states. We have some of their cities mapped out, and it's coming on. It's going to be more and more. And really, the basic example is to realize that before the major fires we've had lately, there were not that many zones available to look at. Now it's much more. So it's very important. Download that app. Get used to what it looks like. Check it once in a while. If there's something going on, turn it on, see what's going on, see what colors the zone may be. The different zones, different colors for any zone will represent different things. Whether it needs to be evacuated, whether you need to be ready to be evacuated. And really, like they were talking before, if it's something like it's in the state, it's about to be evacuated, maybe you should just evacuate on your own instead of not wait for the last official time to evacuate, which by then it may be difficult considering our roads and how narrow they are. So yes, please download that app. That's really the main point. Get used to it, familiarize yourself with it. It includes other things, such as it can point out to you what roads are closed off, traffic control points. It will tell you if there's a need to go where to evacuate to. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where we can actually identify where to take animals to, or options where to take animals to. But that's all taking time, and it's an ongoing process.
John, would you be willing to stick around this evening and help people if they need help getting that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Go ahead and come up to the podium. Okay. Yeah, if you have questions for John, John will stick around. John, thank you so much. All right, I think.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Landis. I've been in La Habra Heights for 35 years. And in the last probably 2 or 3 years, my house has been the cover boy of the compliant brush clearance brochure that's sent out around. If you look on the brochure every year, the last couple of years, our house has been listed as
the good house, right?
As the good side,
okay.
As compliant. Well, anyway, I wanted to tell this little story because I think it's important. My question is, I don't know how many people have gone through this recently, but I had a call from my insurance company recently, and they sent an inspector out. And the inspector came out, and my first reaction was, you're not welcome here on my property. Your goal is to try to cancel my insurance and get rid of me. And I'm compliant. I have evidence from the city. Anyway, then my insurance company, and I called them, and they said, no, you must let them on or you're going to be canceled. So the lady came on my property, went around, and then about 3 weeks later, I got a notice of I'm trying to think of the exact name.
Non-renewal.
No, not non-compliance.
Non-renewal.
Non-renewal. Okay, so they sent me a notice of non-renewal, and I said, we're the poster child for the city on compliance. If you look at my property, it was perfect. There was a few tree branches that were out sort of near the house, and then they saw some leaves in my rain gutter from standing back from a distance. Well, every year we have a service come out and clean out the leaves from our rain gutter. And the week before I actually got the letter, they had come out and cleaned out the rain gutter. And those things change all the time because if you have trees with leaves, they're going to change. So it changed, and anyway, so then I get this notice that they're not going to renew my insurance. And so then I started, complaining, pitching a fit, and it looked like I was bound for California Fair Plan, and it was going to be at least two times my insurance policy. And then I start walking around La Habra Heights, my neighborhood that I've lived in for decades. And my house was the best house anywhere in the area. And I didn't see a house anywhere near me that was remotely compliant they all, in terms of the map, I went on La Habra Heights website and I saw the pictures that you had about the zones. I didn't see anybody that was compliant within those zones. It's a mess. And here I am, and I'm being turned down for my insurance, and I'm just curious, about a couple things. If this is happening to other people, it's a financial catastrophe to try to go with the California Fair Plan. The other problem is real estate sales, that if you want to move or someday sell your property, you're going to have a problem that you're going to have to, that the new buyers will not be insurable, that insurance is going to be a epic problem in this community, and anybody wanting to sell their property will not be able to find insurance companies to sell their. I'm aware of, from talking to my agents, that they're finding many home buyers are not able to be insured, and it's a big issue. I called my brother who lives up in Wrightwood, and he says, well, get used to it. He says, I've been on California Fair since I bought property up here. That it's just a thing possibly of the future for us because the insurance companies want out. And they're getting very aggressive and proactive about trying to cancel people's insurance policies. Luckily, I've been with the same insurance company since I was like 21, and for a long time. And anyway, we worked it out. And so my insurance is now being renewed, but it was the beginnings of a large battle and a problem. But I'm just curious if other people have had this issue. And I'm also curious about the concerns for selling property if it's getting more and more difficult to sell or get insurance for new buyers. Thank you.
So Quan, I know you've been doing some work on this, so maybe you can just take a minute.
Yeah, so let me just kind of, as a result of where we live, home hardening and defensible space is the key, and keeping up maintenance. A lot of folks think, okay, I cleaned my home, I brush cleared, but my roof is 30 years old and I don't have the $20,000 to replace it. Or some of you may still have what we call wood shake roofs that are 30, 40 years old and definitely a fuel. And so just give you a real story that came across last year. A gentleman from the Eden Fire area called me about a year ago just for advice. He's a friend. And he told me my company's non-renewing me because I have this wood shake roof. So I talked to him, explained to him, if you put the investment in, it'll pay for itself over the next 5 years because you're going to save yourself on the insurance costs, and then you're also going to protect your home. Fast forward, Eden Fire, a block and a half away from his home. All the houses burned. He has a Class A roof. It's survived. He has some smoke damage, but his home stands. So, it's part of, as a homeowner, we need to do our part to maintain the home harden. We've been having these education, unfortunately. We had these seminars. We had 20 some odd folks come. We have over 2,500 residents here, 1,600 homes. But when we get 25 people, it's kind of, we lose the balloon that we're trying to build to get our folks to come and get involved because we can get all the information out, but if we don't, we're not going to get it. Now, going back to the insurance, there are a lot of things insurance companies are working on right now. They're doing aerial photos. They're flying over our properties all the time, taking photos as these properties come up for renewal, usually about 90 to 120 days out. And then they're going to send out a notice like, I forget the last name, Mr. Landis. They'll fly over, and the first things they're looking at is there any trees hanging over your house? The defensible space 0 to 5, 0 to 30. Is there any potential fuel exposure? Is the roof outdated, or does it have algae growing on it, which means there's moisture, correct? There's a lot of things that the insurance companies are looking at, and they're going to send out a letter to you. These are the things we see, and you need to correct. And if you don't, your policy is going to non-renew. How do you respond to that? First, call your agent and say, hey, what are my steps that I need to get this thing reinstated? Well, these are your 3 or 4 things that you need to correct. Correct it if you can. Because it's to save your home. And you're doing it for the long term, not just for that one policy year. And if you can't afford it, the solutions that we've been able to get for some of the folks, what we call, so if you're at a lower level, it's called a low slope. If you're at top of the hill, That's high slope. Fire burns up, correct? So the risk for homes that are up on top of the hill is more than likely going to burn with the fire going up. So California Fair Plan is a solution just for the fire protection. It doesn't protect you for any other perils. Then there's what's called a wraparound or difference in condition policy, which is the second policy that most insurance companies are offering. So is La Habra Heights insurable? Yes. But only time it's not going to be insurable is if you don't maintain. There are solutions. There are other third-party, what we call excess and surplus insurance companies that will write the whole policy. But that premium is going to be probably 5 to 10 times what you're paying today. So the key things I recommend you do after you walk away from this event today, survey your home. What was done? Do I have documentation? All my work was done, roof, electrical, HVAC, plumbing. Was it all done by a contractor? And do I have proof that it was a licensed contractor, not a handyman? Because that's what an insurance company is going to look for. So look for that, put that in, organize it. Look at your home. Is there fascia, paint peeling? Because we had one gentleman last year, I think, called. That was one of the reasons one of the insurance companies decided to non-renew him, because all along his fascia board, the paint was cracking and wood was exposed. And if there's lumpy areas, embers are going to get caught. It's going to catch on fire. So if you have an opportunity a couple times a year, paint the fascia board so you can close all the potential exposures. And just maintain. If you try to do it once a year in April when the notice comes out that you got to brush, clear your brush, and you're trying to get a contractor, you're not going to find one. It's going to cost you 10 times more than what you would normally do if you do a maintenance. I remember last year, some of the folks called because I got to get this thing cleared. It's May 1's coming around, and nobody could find a contractor that could come out and clean out your brushes. And that's a lot of land we have to clear, correct? And when you call somebody in emergency again, you're going to pay for it. So continue maintenance. Keep an eye on your home. Take owner of pride, pride of ownership, because that's going to be the key word that we're going to look at. As an insurance company, they're going to look at it and say, this person really have pride and ownership, or are they just neglecting it to let it run like this home that we saw earlier where all the paint and all the wood was chipping away. So, to take away from this today on this thing here is, how can you help yourself? Do your own checklist and make sure your home is up to date, and that'll make it much, much more insurable.
Thank you, Quan. Ray?
Don, this question is for you. I was building a home for a friend of mine, a custom home in Claremont, when this big fire came through. And the fire came within 75 feet of the house. It was across the street. And the portable toilet that was on our side, 50 feet away, melted to a little ball on the ground. And I always wondered, you keep talking about defensible space, and I get all that, but a lot of people, maybe not so much in the city, live in tract homes where they're 10 feet away, the house next door. So if your neighbor's house is burning, and you've done all you can with your house, your 1/16 inch vents and all that, isn't it possible your house will burn just from the heat of the house next door, like maybe like a spontaneous combustion? Is that possible?
Most definitely. So what he's kind of referring to is radiant heat. With these most recent wildfires, speak on the Palisades, for example, a few hours after that fire started, it went from a wildfire to a conflagration. So what that is structure-to-structure ignition. So what Ray's referring to is your next-door neighbor, if their house on fire, a lot of that radiant heat houses. When house fires burn, they're going to burn a lot hotter than normal vegetation, just because of all the synthetics that we have in our house. They're going to burn a lot more hotter and faster, and so a lot of that radiant heat up along your structures, especially if the side setbacks or if they're pretty close to each other, it's going to be a cause for concern. So ultimately, working together you're doing your part, but also trying to work as a community, so everyone's kind of doing their part, is ultimately going to make your communities a lot safer. Hopefully, does that answer your question, sir, in terms of like the radiant heat, in terms
yes.
of... Yeah, so...
But what can you do about it? I mean, can you, for example, can you install maybe some Rainbird sprinkler heads on top of your roof, and when you're evacuating, you know there's a fire coming, and turn them on? And would that cool the house, your own house, enough for it to not catch on fire? Is that possible?
It's possible, but there's a lot of variables that kind of go into it, and our chiefs right here, they can kind of discuss it a little bit more. But sometimes in wind-driven fires, if you have those rainbirds, if there's strong enough winds that where that water is intended to go will potentially go into a different direction. Instead of cooling your house, it's going to cool your neighbor's house. So there's a lot of variables that kind of go into play when kind of discussing that. And Chief, if you'd like to kind of chime in a little bit here. And
So I think what you're getting at is if your neighbor's house is on fire and that's the only house burning, your house, if the fire department gets there, the chances of your house getting on fire are pretty remote, because we'll be able to contain that one house. What you're talking about, I'm assuming, is a major conflagration. When you add all the determining factors that we had evident in these past fires, the Palisades and the Eden fire, you had measures beyond comprehension. There was no way to avoid that fire. You could have had 10,000 to 100,000 firefighters on the scene at that moment, and you would not have been able to put that fire out. Because just think about it, if you wake up in the morning here in La Habra Heights, if you all woke up at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, every single 5,200 of you, and turned on the water, what do you think would happen to your pressure? So we had 1,500 engines opening up 800 fire hydrants, and then the power went down. So understanding how our hydrants work is we're gravity fed here, so we're pretty lucky. That water's just going to keep coming. My engine out there in certain areas of the city, I don't even need the pump on my engine. I can use the gravity. It comes from the hydrant at a pressure of 140 pounds. The normal, you go down here in LA County, the normal hydrant pressure is 85. So I don't even need my pump, because I'm putting out, I could just attach a hose with a nozzle at the end, and I'll put your house out. That's how much pressure. But think of it, there's 5,200 homes, and if they're all burning at once, no way to put that out. So in answer to your question, if it's just a single house, chances are your house is going to survive. That radiant heat isn't going to come into factor, because you're not going to have the sustained winds at 100 miles an hour. That's, just imagine, flame is up like this, 100 miles an hour, your flame's like this. It's like a blowtorch. You just open it up. You see those movies where they get those torches and they aim it at people and it shoots out that way. That's how the fire with the 100-mile-per-hour wind is. There's no way. I've been a firefighter for 47 years. I've been to many, many, many fires. And these fires that we had in Maui, these fires that we had in Palisades, and the Eden fire, those are catastrophic events that are totally unpreventable. There's nothing you can do about that. Not enough water, not enough manpower. It takes 3 engines for each home. So if you just do 5,200 homes, think about how many engines you would need for just La Habra Heights. There aren't enough engines in the state of California that you could have put on any of those fires. So what the young man here is trying to tell you is that do your due diligence. Let's work together. I'll help you identify, just like I've done to several of you already, what areas you can improve in, what is really going to do at maybe a low cost. You talk about you want to use a sprinkler system. Okay, what's your water source? Is it you have a pool?
Yes.
Perfect. There you go. That's your water source. 30,000 gallons?
20.
20. That's enough. I'll tell you, to put out a house, 1,600 square foot house, you only need about 500 to 600 gallons of water. A house burning. One single tank, if you use your water judiciously. If you have a bigger house, it's going to take 2-3 engines with all their 1,500, maybe 2,000 gallons of water. Won't take much. And then the amount of water that's coming out of that sprinkler is not very much. It'll last you all day long. But it'll be affected by, like the young man said, winds. Winds will affect it. And then once you lose all the water, you know, you're done. But like I said, it's just a matter of getting your house prepared. And I'm going to throw some things out at you just to finish up for my part. I'm going to use some of the stuff that we use. There's a lot of nomenclature that I can put out there, but I'm not going to because you won't understand it. It's what we use in the fire service. So a couple of them is when we do an initial assessment, think about yourself. Can you survive here if a major fire is coming? The answer should be no. If not, leave now. Remember that. I think Quan or Mayor Pepisa said it. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Get out. If you have problems, we need to identify that. John Dominguez is working on we have neighbors. We have to take care of them. There are a lot of neighbors that we have that can't get out on their own. So we're going to have a program designed to identify them so we can help them. But all I can tell you is that it's very hard to try to do anything about a fire that's got 100-mile-per-hour winds behind it. We cannot get ahead of it. That's our success rate, is how far ahead can we get of the fire? If we can't get ahead of the fire, we're not going to be very successful. Thank you.
All right. So, yes, Stephen.
Thank you. 3 quick things. One, Ray reminded me about setbacks. We have large setbacks, but there are also setback encroachments. So we need to maybe look at the code and reduce the amount of feet that people can encroach into the setback, because that's put them closer to their neighbors. And then on insurance, I've had 3 companies leave the state. So something to think about, maybe someone knows about this, is if we formed a mutual insurance company just for fire protection. First couple of years, you have to build up some capital, but we could probably make it so at least we could depend on having insurance all the time. Then water supply, we have gravity, but it's supplied by pumps, just like in the Palisades. In fact, we have the upper zone, 4 million gallons of storage, exactly the same as the Palisades had. But if the power goes out and the pumps stop working, or they don't have the generators, those tanks are empty, and at some point, there's nothing left. So just be aware of that too. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen.
Mayor, can I finish up
Absolutely.
one of my comments?
Yes.
Chief Martin, thank you for those comments, and I want you to know that I'm very worried about fires, okay? Because I'm in the middle of about a 10-acre parcel, the only house, and I'm on the top of the hill, so the fire would come up and get my house. So I've tried to make my home as fire safe. It's all smooth stucco, boxed-in eaves with no vents. Everything is screened. But that's not enough for me. So I've taken one of my pool motors and installed a line that goes to the outside. All the pumps are in a building. And on the outside, I have 2 Ys that come out with a valve where you can attach an 1.5-inch fire hose. And I'm just finishing it up, and I'm going to make a nice plaque with very clear directions. Push this button to turn it on. But see, that's not enough, because what if the electricity goes out? Then that pump won't work. So I've put together a fire pump, and this is the gentleman that was asking about the pool. Now, you can buy these online, and they probably start about 2,000, and I've seen them 7 or 8,000. But me being the frugal guy that I am, I bought a trash pump at Harbor Freight for $400. They have another more super duper one for $800. And for a total of all the parts and hoses, I have a fire pump for about $1,000. So, and that's going to be in that pool room. In case you guys show up, I want you to save my house. It means the world to me. So you'll have the pump from the motor, and with a, oh, and it's on a reel outside with 100 feet of hose and a nozzle, so you don't even have to bring your hoses down to the pool. And then there'll be the fire pump. And one last comment, Don. You said at Zone 0, you don't want any bushes, nothing. That's contrary to the American home. Everybody has nice, maybe roses around the home. Isn't that a little bit over the top? I mean, do you really expect people to have maybe 5 feet of concrete or just dirt around their house? I don't quite get that.
Yeah, so with the whole Zone 0, that's, I mean, I don't expect anyone, I mean, there's a few people that have had it perfect. Typically, most people have vegetation in that area. But this is kind of, I'm just sharing what insurers are requiring and just kind of educating people on what is kind of going on out there in terms of what the requirements are and how things are kind of looking to change in terms of that direction. But what does help is at least limiting a lot of that vegetation that is in that area. So if you do have a big hedge, possibly maybe swapping that hedge and putting some stuff in planters that you can move out if needed. And instead of having grasses there, putting rocks or gravel or and limiting the amount of vegetation there. Pots and planters are great, just don't keep them super heavy. So if you do have to move that vegetation away, it's not gonna be very cumbersome, or it's gonna be easier to do. Or if you do have a cement areas in that area, putting stuff on rollers is very good because, like I said, moving it away, you can easily roll it away, or you can readjust and kind of redecorate as you see fit. But in terms of going on and expecting people to do that, I mean, I don't expect anyone to do it, but in terms of recommending, the science is kind of showing that it is beneficial to at least reduce as much of that vegetation as possible. Yes, sir.
So I too, like Mr. Ray, am frugal. And during the floods last year, I did buy a trash pump from Harbor Freight. It's a 3-inch inlet outlet. And I bought about 75 feet of 3-inch hose and about 100 feet of 2-inch hose. So that reduction or that increase in pressure from the 3-inch to the 2-inch allows me to spray about 75 feet because I retrofitted all of my threading connectors with a cam lock, which is much, much better, much faster. So in case there's a fire, what you do is you get all the hosing, you roll it out, and with the cam lock system, I mean, you're in and out in seconds rather than trying to thread on a 3-inch MPT pipe. So I did that, and I mean, it's step one of my plan to help if there's ever a fire. Step two is also going to be to retrofit the house with sprinklers. But a trash pump is, I mean, you cannot go wrong with the trash pump, for sure. And especially if you have a water source like a pool, if in case of the fire, the city is almost 100% certain to cut off the power to all the power lines, to stop the fire from spreading. So having a gas-powered trash pump is the way to go. And so, yes, I do agree with you. That's definitely, absolutely the first thing you should do. And also having a sprinkler system on the house, and I was quoted, I have a friend that owns a sprinkler company, and he did all the sprinklers at our business. And I said, hey, can you come to the house and give me a quote on how much you would charge me to put the sprinklers on the house? And oh my gosh, I mean, thank God I was sitting down when he told me the price because I almost fainted. It was about $80,000, And he said that because he knows me, he would do it for $60,000, And I said, I mean, that's just out of control, but the system was so robust. I mean, it was so advanced. There was they tapped into the pool pump, and I have 2 pool pumps, 3.25 horsepower, so they're very powerful. And they had just so you guys can understand what you're gonna face if they do come out. For that money, you're paying for a backup generator, you're paying for, an app that can control it from your phone, so you don't have to go home and turn on the generator to turn on the pump to water the house. You can do it from anywhere in the world. So it's, very, very advanced, very expensive too, but you can also do that for a fraction of the cost if you know what you're doing on your own, which is what I plan to do. So there are many ways to skin a cat, I guess you could say, but having a trash pump, so you have your independent water source, which is your pool, and then your independent power source, which is the gas power motor, is definitely the way to go.
Thank you. All right. Joelle.
I'm wondering, on the 16th-inch mesh that you're talking about, is that available also for fire arresters?
Yeah.
Okay.
Home Depot, Lowe's,
And then
any lumber yard, they can sell you that mesh. But the problem is, who's going to cut it for you? You have to cut it. Just make sure you take measurements.
And then talking about the large animal evacuation, is there any thought or designated places set up where these animals are going to be taken to? And then those horse trailers that are doing round trips back and forth, that some kind of clearance that those vehicles could be, let's clear them off and get them in here, because more animals, because it's not going to be one trip of one horse trailer going to one house and they're out. I'm just, thoughts on that.
I think we've identified a couple spots. The park is one, and we're also thinking of the church on Harbor in Fullerton. There's another one that's remote.
LA County does a pretty good job once there's a fire bringing in resources. I noticed at Eaton, they had massive amounts of resources coming in there from both the animal services side, and also we're coordinating volunteers that we're bringing, large animal evacuation vehicles in. So, not that we want to put all our eggs in that basket. One of the issues that was clear from Eaton and Palisades is resourcing. When you have a massive fire in LA County, especially like Palisades, a lot of the resources moved over to Palisades. And then when the Eaton fire broke out, it was very hard to resource that fire. Even with basic things that normally would have shown up took, hours, if not a couple extra days to get over to Eaton, just because it was the second fire. And, that's what concerns me, is really the resourcing issue when you have multiple fires breaking out in LA County or in the Southern California area. I'm going to do some closing. I don't know, Chief Jorgensen, if you had anything you wanted to add or comments?
I think Chief Jorgensen will talk about the brush program.
Yep.
So May 1st is definitely when we are going to kick off or initiate our brush clearance program for 2025. It's going to look a little bit different this year. And when I say a little bit different, historically, to be quite honest with everybody in the room, there was a lot of lag time given when it came to cleaning up the areas in the city, and some of it never got done until the following calendar year. And we're not going to be doing that this year. And some of you may have already, I don't know if anybody in the room has experienced this already, because I've gotten a lot of concerned residents who ask me if brush clearance has already started, the season that is. And yes, it has. And what I mean by that is it's an ongoing year-round endeavor. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir with everybody here. However, the reality of it is that we have seen unprecedented fires this calendar year, and this is how we started 2025 off. And quite honestly, I know I'm not alone in this, but nobody wants to see what happened to our neighbors to the north happen here, or really in any other community that, for that matter. However, we do live in a very high fire hazard zone. And that being said, we have the most restrictive brush clearance and vegetation management protocols in place. And what I'm going to do, just so you're aware, is we are bringing on some additional help. We do have our code enforcement inspector as well. He's dual cross-trained as a brush inspector as well. He is my right hand. And as the season progresses, what we're going to do is we're going to be bringing on an additional, from my understanding, we've been budgeted for one additional seasonal inspector, which that seasonal inspector typically works between May and, or I believe April, and October, around Halloween. And then we're going to be bringing on a couple interns from Mount San Antonio College to assist as well. So if in the event, I've been trying to relay this information to many of the residents that I come in contact with throughout my inspection processes, that if you've already done the work and your case has been officially closed, but yet during the cross-training phase of with these new inspectors, if you happen to find that you received another notice in the mail and it was very recent that your case has been closed, just reach out to me. My name will be at the bottom of the notice. I'm used to the phone calls, and I really personally enjoy getting out to the community and meeting all of you and working with you. And I don't want you to feel that this is going to be a situation in terms of our brush clearance season. This is going to be a situation where we're not going to work with you. This is just, you know, it's black or white, and this is, you know, the buck stops here. That's not the case. What I'm referring to in terms of it being a little different is that you're going to see me out in the community. You're going to get to know me. If you ever feel that your brush clearance inspection to your with your neighbor does not match yours, well, then go ahead and reach out to me. This is a primarily complaint-driven division, and that being said, it's very challenging for us to hit every parcel, every inspection cycle, but that is my goal. And not only is that my goal, I tend to accomplish my goal, so this will happen. However, what I want to reiterate is that I want to work with everyone, and I understand. I'm very empathetic to people's situations, whether they're financial, health related. Recently, I met with a resident who is dealing with a lot of health complications within his family, and it was questionable if he had the financial means to get the work done, and it was a heavy, heavy lift. And granted, the notice did give him a hard deadline to get this done. However, what I did was I actually went out there and I met with him in person. I looked at the amount of work that needed to be done, and essentially I asked how long you think he would need it. He told me 4 weeks. I gave him 6, and the work got done within 3. So I am very empathetic to everybody's situations, and I don't want you to feel that, for lack of a better term, there's a new sheriff in town, but there is. And I want you all to feel comfortable in knowing that I am out here doing the work in your best interest, running and managing our fire prevention program for the safety of everybody here. Some of it may not look, at times it may not seem like the work is getting done fast enough. However, what I want to instill in everybody is a sense of comfort in knowing that I am here to help all of you, and I'm here not only help all of you in coming up with some solutions to your problems, but also maybe to enforcing some of those challenging neighbors, to get their brush clearance done as well. Because at the end of the day, if it's not done, we will abate the property, and we will push it to lien. And I don't like having to do that, but I'm not afraid to do that. Okay, so if anybody has any questions right now, or even after this workshop, I'll be more than happy to take any and answer. Yes, sir. Come on up, Bruce.
Before I say anything bad, I have total respect for these fire department guys. I've spent 35 years in this department as a volunteer, so I've seen a lot of it. One thing that's not been brought up, we need volunteers in the city with the fire watch group. These guys can't do their job unless we report the fire. And every minute that that fire gets going makes it twice as big as it needs to be. Without you folks, city people, watching, looking, reporting smoke, be aware of it, they can't do their job. It takes them 5 minutes from here to there. That 5 minutes makes a fire twice as bad as it needs to be. So if we don't report it, it takes them time. The same if we have a major evacuation. We aren't going to have a sheriff up here for half an hour to an hour to do any good. We need to be observing all over the heights. I happen to live on top of the hill, so I get to watch a lot of it. And it does happen. When I was in the department, we had 5 Jeeps. We had volunteers all over the heights. So they were watching all over the heights. That's why we never really had a bad fire up here. I've been here 70 years, and it's changed. These guys try. Don't get me wrong. Total respect for every one of them. But they can't do it by themselves. If we don't report it to them, they aren't going to see it. Fire Watch is one of the reasons that they get the information. And we need more volunteers. That's all I want to say. They do a good job, no question. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. John?
Okay, so he's inspired me to speak out of turn. Yes, we do need more volunteers, and one of the volunteer projects I'm working on is to get a volunteer list going, to get volunteers to help, hopefully with brush clearance for people who may be elderly, who may need help in doing that. So yes, like Bruce was saying, we need more volunteers, and I think that would be one of the projects that we need to get started on, is to help people who may not be able, for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. I live here too, and if they're in a situation, I'm going to be in that same situation. So we need to help each other out and get a list of volunteers published on the internet, on paper, the magazine, everywhere, to get more volunteers to start helping out with the brush clearance. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Chief?
So just to close, I also, Mr. Fernandez, am concerned with the fire dangers that are here in La Habra Heights. To that end, the last 2 years we've conducted a brush drill so that you will not be too worried and concerned. At the end of this month, the 27th, 28th, and 29th, we will have a joint effort of all our partners, Brea, Fullerton, Orange County Fire Authority, LA County, Santa Fe Springs, will all work together to have a joint brush drill. It'll, last year was at the park, this year it will be at Murphy Ranch, but La Habra Heights will be included. So when we do something like that, we set up strategies for the what if. What if this happens? What if this road is closed? So just so you know, just so you're aware, that's coming. And don't be alarmed. You can tell your neighbors that we're going to be out here in force. Last year we had 60 engines participating. I anticipate this year to be 80 to 100. More and more people want to get involved, and so we're hoping to partner and work with them to that end. Thank you.
Do you have anything else?
I got a few things. If you haven't joined the Facebook page for La Habra Heights, it's a good communication tool. It's it has to be admitted. So once you answer a few questions as to your address, you'll be admitted in. But it's a good communication tool. I believe there are over 300 members on that page. Number 2 is April 26th is Love Our City campaign that most of the cities are already adopted. We don't have one of those here in La Habra Heights, but we do have our quarterly cleanup. So we were thinking as Emergency Preparedness Committee to get more volunteers, to utilize the April 26th to call it Love La Habra Heights, and then expand our road cleaning from just away from Hacienda to East-West Road, So
Maybe,
folks,
maybe just take just a second, because
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of people know about that, and John, you organize it. So
We're
maybe
looking
just
at April
explain
26th.
about what the road cleaning is, where it is, and
so the last couple that we did as quarterly in conjunction with our trash cleanup dump day is to walk up and down Hacienda Road and pick up trash. And we're picking up a lot of potential flammable goods. I mean, we picked up nitrogen cartridges up on the hill, and a lot of cigarette butts. I mean, people are throwing out their cigarette butts at the top of the hill, and I would say each session, me personally, I picked up over 100 cigarette butts on Hacienda Road. And that's just me, out of the 20 volunteers. So we do need volunteers, and this is a good way to get to your neighbors. There are a lot of good people. There are a lot of good folks that want to come out, and that 1.5, 2 hours of just socializing and picking up. And then at the end, some of those folks will go have breakfast together and just get to know each other a little bit better. But it's a good way to know your neighbor. And John spoke about the 5 zones. If you don't know what that is, let me show you a quick map. And you can, the Genesee has been designed just like this. This is our original map, but Genesee was designed to mirror this. So identify what zone you live in and reach out to your neighbors and start getting information, do a checklist. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, how many of you guys are aware that we're the only city in the USA recognized as a city as a Firewise USA community? Did you know you're getting an insurance discount on your policy? Okay, so look at the bottom of the discounts. You're going to see a Firewise USA community. The reason why is we are a 100% brush clearance city. What does that mean? We got to comply with what our fire marshal is trying to do, is clear your brush. So that's one of the steps, and the other is home hardening and defensible space, defending your home, get to your neighbors. And then, as time changes next week, smoke alarm battery checks, correct? Please do that. And then finally, what John and the others requested, we need volunteers. The more folks come out and partake in these, Emergency Preparedness Committee meets every third Thursday here at 6 o'clock, and usually only about half an hour long. We had one session that went a full hour because of a lot of issues came up and there were a lot of questions. We're available to give you resources. What we don't know, we'll find it for you. But just to mirror what our presenters talked about, they talked about 0, 1, and 2 areas of defensible space. Firewise USA call it immediate, which is 0 to 5, intermediate is 5 to 30, and extended zone to 30 to 100, and beyond. If you have 10-acre lots like Mr. Fernandez has, there's other things you must do beyond that zone. So we have these available. I will order more of these. These will be going out from the fire marshal's office about brush clearance, and this is a great resource. It also has a checklist. Okay, so that's all I have to share. Again, if you run into any issues with insurance issues, the people that are listening from home, reach out to us. At least we'll give you a direction how to resolve your issue. And I think we resolve almost every single situation, because we're going to go back to you and say, did you do these? Instead of trying to find something to replace, but did you prevent from the insurance company finding a reason to get off the policy? So we're here for you. Come and participate with us, be a part of us, and let's make the city a safer place. Thank you.
thank you, Quan. Ray?
Thank you for saying I'm on a 10-acre property, but I don't own 10 acres. I own 1, but I'm surrounded. I don't want the fire marshal to make me clean up 10 acres, okay? But anyway, I just want to close with something. I love this city. I'm a developer, and some people think that I want to, turn 1-acre lots into quarter-acre lots. Nothing could be further from the truth. I love the 1 home per acre zoning is kind of a sacred thing to me. And what a great, beautiful city we live in. When I'm having my coffee, I see the sun rising in the east, and dinner, I'm seeing the sun setting on the west. And I kind of pinch myself. How lucky am I, me and my family, to be able to enjoy this? Not a lot of people can afford a home here, but there's a but. I have been increasingly concerned about the condition of properties in the city, the people not doing their roadside clearance, their weed abatement. And I just gonna ask my fellow neighbors, do your weed clearance, do your road clearance. It's for your own good, and it's for the good of the community. And, the fire marshal shouldn't have to give you 2 or 3 notices. We all know what's required. And it's not a May 1st thing, it's a year-round thing. Some people think, I let my weeds grow, my tumbleweeds, but as long as they're down by May 1st, and it doesn't work that way. So, and if you've ever listened to the Planning Commission, I always talk about being considerate of your neighbors. I think we could solve so many problems if we would just think, is this good for my neighbor? Am I being considerate? Am I being a good neighbor? So I'm going to ask everybody, be considerate, do your weed abatement, and it's for everybody's good. I would hate to see what happened in, what's that, Eaton Fire, was that Altadena? And I mean, can you imagine if that would have happened here? I mean, it would be horrible. So anyway, thank you, Mayor Pespisa, for hosting this. I think this is very good, so thanks.
So I know we've heard a lot of scary things tonight, and we've heard some positive things. I'm really excited about a couple. I'm excited for having our new fire marshal. That's exciting. I'm also looking for some change. So, on the planning side, I really want to look at, we're fortunate. We don't have homes built on top of one another for the most part. We've got 1-acre zoning. But I constantly see, modifications for these setbacks. And I really think that as a city, we need to start thinking about are setback modifications or setback exceptions appropriate given what we've seen. The reason for the zoning, my understanding, talking to some of the older folks that have lived here, and I'm now, I guess, one of them, but the folks that have lived here a lot longer than I have, the reason for that zoning really was in the early days because of fire protection. They didn't want houses built on top of one another, and they wanted that buffer zone between homes to allow for fire protection. So really looking, at as we go forward, looking at that planning process and saying, should we be given the number of exceptions that we do around setbacks? Stepping up code enforcement, making sure that we have that defensible space. And I get it. Some people's definition of a kept home is different than others. But when you can't walk around your property because there's so much stuff, you're just creating a hazard for your neighbor. And so, I've already talked with Chief Jorgensen about identifying these houses, working with our code enforcement department to start getting, I get it, getting these houses on a plan to get rid of the clutter that's around the home and making sure that we can create the defensible spaces. Chief Jorgensen did talk about our brush clearance program. I know that past fire marshals have been very willing to work with people. I hear he's going to work with people too, but we have to get aggressive with our brush clearance. We have to get the fuel out of the city. Some success stories. Brian Bergman sitting in the back. Brian and Dennis Larity were very instrumental in getting the very first heli hydrant in LA County installed on an easement that the Habitat provided for the city. We're very fortunate to have that resource. It's what's called in the, as far as Chief Martin has told me, it's a force multiplier. I think I've got that right? It allows one helicopter, instead of having to go land or having to go find a water source miles away from the city, we have a water source that's almost inexhaustible right at a high point within the city that allows the first helicopter to begin to aggressively fight a fire in the city. We have another resource called Firewatch. And if you're not a member of Firewatch, why aren't you a member of Firewatch? It's free. I mean, I think there's is Mark still here? No? Mark left? So I think it's 35, or the dues are like $35 or $40 a year just to pay for equipment and keeping the repeater running. And I think the radios, if you can't afford a radio, let me know, I'll buy one for you. I think the radios are $20 or $30 on Amazon. They're not that expensive. Mark was here. They gave a really good presentation. For those of you that, we haven't had one of these in this city, but there's a thing called a public safety power shutoff. And if it happens in this city, that's probably your first clue that you might want to start thinking about evacuating when you start getting those public safety power shutoff notices, because that's telling you that the weather is forecasted to be fire weather. And that if the utility is going to start turning off your power, it's probably a time to start packing your car and getting stuff ready to go, and if not, leave when that happens. Because the next thing that happens is your power is going to get shut off. And in this city, we already have enough problems with your cell phones. I don't know if you're like me, but at my home, if the power goes off, my cell phone stops working. So Firewatch is unique in that the radios have batteries. The batteries last 5 to 6 hours. The repeaters have backup capabilities on them. And that radio might be your only way to communicate. I'm not saying that you should stay if you lose your power. If my power goes off and I'm not able to communicate and we're in a PSPS event, I've got to start getting my wife's 13 animals in crates and out the door. There are other tools available. So Firewatch, if you're not a member of Firewatch, you should really think about becoming a member of Firewatch. Kathy Sobel and Mark that were here can help. I know there's several, I don't know if Norm's still here. Norm was here earlier. Is Norm's out there? Okay. Yeah, Norm can help. Bruce Thomas. There's a bunch of Firewatch members that are here. Get a radio. I keep mine on in the house, and the Firewatch members are really disciplined. There's no chatter on this thing. Every Sunday, they make sure all the radios work. And that's about the only time, unless there's an event going on in the city. And when there's an event going on in the city, you have people telling you about the event that's going on in the city. So it works very well. Quan brought it up, so I won't go into it. Volunteerism. John brought it up. There's a lot of opportunities to volunteer. I hope that's a Amber Alert. But if you're not volunteering, consider volunteering. EPC, I think, always needs help. We do the quarterly cleanups. Firewatch is a volunteer organization. There's a lot of opportunities to volunteer. And then lastly, I just want to thank everyone that came tonight and participated. Dominic, thank you so much for your time. Chiefs, thank you for being here tonight. Ray, Quan, and then you guys. I mean, I'm just really thankful that so many people care enough. I mean, in my years of doing this, I think the only time I've seen a bigger crowd here is when we had the meetings to talk about why we closed Hacienda Road back in 2019. I think that was the only time I've seen more people in this room. So thank you so much. I know I'm going to stick around for a little bit. It's 8 o'clock. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. This is about the time frame that I thought we would run, 2 hours. Rafferty?
I just wanted to say that as we are always looking to improve the brush clearance program, if you have some thoughts or ideas, what you see as residents receiving that information, doing the work, what might get your attention better, might be difficult in the process of doing the clearance or hiring a contractor, some of those stumbling points you might come across, please speak with the chiefs, myself, council members, as we're in this process of adopting or starting our new brush clearance program. At the April council meeting, we'll have a public hearing as one of those steps in that piece. We're always looking to improve that, and especially this year, make a little more changes to it. So please give us your information and some of those things that in the past may have been the stumbling blocks for you guys on, I can't find a contractor to do it, or I'm not quite sure what needs to be cleared, or I can't pay for it, or it went to abatement. And some of those things are ideas you may have that we can then take back, work on, and then work with council to make those changes to the programs to make it better and improve and help our residents be able to complete those brush clearance things. So please chat with us and share those ideas you may have. Thank you.
All right. And then I want to lastly, and last but not least, thank staff. So this was a out-of-cycle meeting and one that was not planned, so staff did support it. We did make sure we videotaped it because I did hear there were several people that couldn't make it tonight but wanted to watch the videotape version, so we did have staff here to support. So thank you so much for giving up your Monday evening. All right, thank you all.